Hey, so this is going to be the update video for like June, July. Um, we're not going to get into too much detail for this one because a lot of it's frontal lobe stuff, and that's going to be just kind of a bigger thing overall. I'll just kind of tell you what's here, a lot of what it's been for. Dr. Allen developed a lot because of some mental health problems. Someone whose anxiety was so crippling that they wouldn't leave their bedroom. There wasn't any place that felt safe. I don't even know if that was safe either, unless her husband was with her there. Wasn't going there, wasn't able to go to work. It's pretty bad. Now she's like perfectly normal. Things are going good. She's going out and she's back to work and she's fine being alone and she feels safe once again. So there's several different areas there. So there's a few additional ones in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. So those are connections to the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. That's going to be lots of recognizing emotions in others. So, think of things like Asperger's or autism, or some people just kind of socially not picking up on cues, things like that. And there's the inferior parietal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and precuneus. Precuneus, great for anything that's kind of there from frontal lobe thing, default mode network, and like ADHD stuff. But I mean, pretty much any of these frontal lobe things help with emotions. They help with cognitive control, problem solving, and a lot more. So I mean, you talk to anybody in the mental health world, and obnoxiously, they're always going to say, "Hey, work on frontal lobe." It's like, not really helpful, right? But that's where most magic happens, right? Most of our conscious thinking. So there's those, and then the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is newer, and those have been pretty awesome as well. So there's some connections to the amygdala, so more the anger, fear, intense emotions that way. Anterior insula, which you put on there, is a good chunk of the salience network. So changing tasks from one thing to another. So like being able to shift out of like a daydream into a decision, right? Rather than just drifting and then aimlessly going nowhere. There's connections to the cerebellum, lobule 11A, Crus 1, Crus 2. So conscious control of motor functions and things like that. I did one of these for tinnitus that came after crying, or like a lot of emotional distress. That would pop up. So I did one of these there for that. And I think it was the temporal pole one. Okay. I have to check back on that one to be sure. I don't know how often you're going to find that one though. But if you really want to know, let me know. Send me a text or something and I'll find it. Then there's the frontal pole, which is like the further forward you get in the frontal lobe, the more like intense the problem solving capacity is, or more like personality stuff, just kind of like the stronger that it gets. And there's connections to the hippocampus. Inferior parietal cortex, another one for focus and attention. Intraparietal sulcus, lateral. We know sulcus is a space, but a lot of function is described around the sulcus. So don't get caught up on the anatomy of that too much. Just the region and the function is there, and you can read about it. And then there's actually a few parts of the intraparietal sulcus defined, and they have lots of like motor coordination functions associated with them as well. So check those out. There's 4 of those, and there's 2 of the frontal polar areas. Again, remember that's good high-tech problem solving and executive functions and decision making and emotional control and social recognition and all sorts of stuff there. Right extrastriative area V5 as well. So there's those guys that have been really, really helpful for many, many things. And honestly, people are just going to be, they're going to enjoy them. One of these is like, do Dr. Allen calls it kind of like the happy treatment, and it mentions that in there. Laughter. Yeah, I think that's the superior frontal gyrus, I believe. And then there's the temporal pole one, also has to do with performance anxiety. So for people that talk themselves out of situations or inability to do that, that's the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex temporal pole, rostrodorsal temporal pole. So Kelly and anyone working with athletes tend to choke or any of that kind of stuff, that'd probably be really helpful for them. So there's quite a few good things there. And then we picked up a few cranial nerve functions, the inferior salivatory nucleus of 9 to the hippocampus, olfactory system, parasympathetic otic ganglion, and submaxillary ganglion as well. That's more submaxillary ganglion or submandibular, same thing. So the salivary glands, did that one for Bell's palsy thing. The inferior salivatory nucleus for gagging, and that's where that one is mostly done for. We have some nucleus ambiguous as well for gagging as well. So we got nucleus ambiguous tied to 9 and 11, and the solitary connection there as well. So once again, gagging reflex. And then there's this lateral horn interneurons. It's an interesting one. Probably more something to check out for like a POTS syndrome or another autonomic thing. I'm not 100% sure on what it does completely yet, but it's interneuron between the lateral horn or the hypaxial motor column, which is a lot of this sympathetic stuff. Now, read the stimulate on that one. It says you're gonna need to walk first before you stimulate with normal breathing. They're gonna feel rather strange. That's pretty typical. Things feel really weird. Then you need to go walk, get their heart rate up a little bit, and then you do the normal breathing, and then they level off pretty nice. But make sure you do that, or they might not like you. Then we got the SLF, superior longitudinal fasciculus. So it has two connections. One of them is from the so they both originate dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex. One ends up in the precuneus, one in the superior parietal lobule for visual spatial recognition. Both important for depression, and they're parts of the frontal parietal network, which is executive and complex problem solving and cognitive flexibility and goal-directed behavior. And the frontal parietal network helps you shift from one focus to another, and it can have effects on the other networks, and there are 7 of them, so it is a very important one to be able to switch tasks and change things there. ADHD, big deal. But it can also be tied into, again, depression, so people can't get out of the spiral or whatever. This can help. There, so there's those. Next up, we've got a lot of optic stuff. We got a couple more. Well, let me go to spinal nerves first. So we've got the C5 siniovertebral nerve, greater rami and somatic branch, and then the C6 greater rami sympathetic branch. Those are up, and the L3 nerve root type 2 afferent satellite cells are also done. I don't feel like I need to explain those. I'll just say that they innervate the disc, the siniovertebral nerves, and the type 2 fibers are proprioceptive length determining our muscle length communications, right? Okay, and then for the eye stuff, so I'm just going to go over general function here, and then you can figure it out later. All the little pieces, because they're going to be continuously developing, but here's what we got. So you have the pigment epithelium first, okay? And then right beneath that you have your photoreceptors, right? So we'll call these rods and cones, okay? And then there's different colors there, so we've got a couple of those. And then from here, the next thing is you have a bipolar cell, we'll call it. They don't necessarily look like this. This is how I'm drawing them, okay? In between the two, you have a horizontal cell. So that's going to pick up info from multiple rods and cones and converge it onto a bipolar cell. So there's horizontal cell, photoreceptors, cones, rods, bipolar neurons, and you're going to have multiple of these bipolar neurons And they're going to be named by shape and stuff too. So again, they don't look like this. But then you go from here, then you get all of these little connections that are going to come together. And they can have both inhibitory and excitatory connections, okay? And then they're going to come synapse on a retinal ganglion cell, okay? And these guys can branch and whatever. So then this becomes the optic nerve. So collectively it becomes the optic nerve, okay? So you got light comes in, hits the rods and cones. There's 206 million of these. And the interesting thing is these guys get changed out every 12 days. Craziness. Okay, so there's that. Now, photoreceptors, then it's going to get integrated by some horizontal cells onto some bipolar cells. And then the bipolar cells are going to convey that information down. They'll be integrated again by amacrine cells. And both of these can have both inhibitory and excitatory inputs, right? Onto an RGC, retinal ganglion cell, and then it becomes a nerve. So by the time you get to the retinal ganglion cells, you've gone from 206 million to 1.6. So much more compressed image, okay? And then there you go. So we've got treatments of each of these. So I think there's a couple divisions of amacrine, a couple of horizontals. There's going to be several of these, but I only have like 3 of those done, or 4, maybe 4 or 5. And then I don't think I have any bipolars yet, but we got these guys. So if people are having a hard time telling the difference between different colors next to each other or around other colors or things like that, or maybe at a greater distance, you know, these are pretty helpful. Just straight color blindness or night blindness is going to be rods, or any difficulty there mostly. And then anything during the day, so even this could be just vision problems too. Cones are going to have an important role there. There you go. That's kind of what you have to work with those. So that does it for our monthly update. This time around, next time, it should be much more effective. We'll run through all the other stuff that keeps failing us and see if we can't make this more interactive experience for everybody. But thanks for watching.